Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can everyone hear me all the way to the back? All right. I'm very happy to be invited here today by ST Properties, and I'm very happy to see such a great turnout, especially on a Sunday when I think all of us would, in fact, there's a few other exhibitions going on, right? There's the IT show not too far from here, and then there's NATAS as well. But very glad to see all of you here today. Today I'm going to talk about the draft master plan. What exactly is the master plan? That's for part one. For part two, about the Singapore residential property market. Well, if I just simply talk about the master plan for 30 minutes, I think some of you will drift off to sleep. So let's talk about something that complements it. And also about, I'll end off with the outlook and conclusion. Part one, the draft master plan. Now, the master plan is basically an urban planning instrument, right, used by the government. It indicates basically the zoning, three main things: zoning, what is allowable use, what is that piece of land allowed to be used for, the plot ratio, which is the development density. The higher the plot ratio, the denser is that the area will be developed into, and the maximum height of buildings, or what in the industry we sometimes just say height restrictions. Normally we just say, oh, what's the height restriction of that piece of land, right? It can be measured in terms of number of stories, or it can be measured in terms of the number of meters above the mean sea level. It basically shows the possible future developments and the constraints in different locations all over Singapore. The master plan is amended every 5 years. Actually, before 1958, there was something that looks like the master plan under the British administration when we were still a British colony, right? But that time, that it was all in hard copy, in maps. I've seen it. In fact, I think it might belongs more like to a museum, and it's mostly in the southern part of Singapore, because in other parts of Singapore, the northern parts and so on, in Jurong was still a swamp. In Punggol, Hougang is a lot of agriculture site. So it's mostly the south. But since 1965, our independence, to 1980, it has some amendments basically every 5 years. But in 85, there was a major review. The government wants to see there is a more long-term plan for our master plan, for the urban planning of Singapore. So development guide plans for each town were designed, and there was no master plan until 1998. Oh, there really is water dripping. It's dripping on the laptop. I hope it doesn't cause a short circuit. Okay, 2000, and then since 98, there was basically one new master plan every 5 years. Now, I remember 98, the master plan was available in CD. You must buy it from URA. $50, and all rights reserved. So if you go and go and burn the CD, duplicate, you're actually breaking the law. The government can come after you. But of course, many companies just buy one, and somehow, miraculously, it's on everybody's PC in the company. So now, in 2008, when the master plan came out, it was gazetted somewhere at end of 2008. But in 2013, it's a bit delayed. It's still in the draft form. So this master plan is used by planners, architects, developers, real estate professionals, and you and I, property owners and buyers. Basically, you may want to know what's going to happen, usually around your neighborhood, right? What kind of new plans that will come out. So the draft master plan must be gazetted by Parliament. Since Parliament is sitting this month, maybe they might pass it, they might get it gazetted, and then it's no longer draft, you'll actually be in a way confirmed. Now, if you go on the internet, in the past you have to get the CD, now you can get it on the internet, on the URA website. This is something that you see. The different zonings are color-coded. If you see Pulau Tekong, that big island, let me see if I can get this. Is yellow. So yellow usually is reserve site. In Tuas, Jurong and Tuas, you see that purple part, that is actually mostly industrial, heavy general industrial. And in most parts of Singapore, you see this beige color, orangey beige color, and that actually is for residential use. But you can see there are purple spots all over Singapore. So in a way, industrial land is in a way spread all over Singapore. Now, I'll just go into a few interesting areas between the new and the old master plan. One of them is Holland Village. Now, if you look at the slides on the left, basically, I think you can see it better than me because on here, the lights is not showing up very well. One of the areas here, basically, we see that there is an increase in the intensity. The plot ratio has been increased. So the residential part of Holland Village, they are going to see more intensity use. The other interesting thing is actually the park. There's green area here. It is going to eventually be turned into this blue area, which is actually a mixed residential commercial site. So it's going to be, imagine you're going to have one or more shopping centers and on top of it, apartments. So that is going to come out sometime in the future. Another area is the Kallang area, or Kampong Bugis. Now, this area is near the Kallang MRT station, and there was, in the old master plan, basically we see that there is one area that is quite yellow. Sorry. Okay, the laser pointer is not showing up very well. Maybe I can do this area. Okay, you see the cursor? Now, basically, this is for future plan. It's going to end up as more residential area. So we're going to see more waterfront housing in this area. As for this particular area, formerly it was reserved or zoned for hotel use, but now it's also going to be residential. So the Kallang area, in times to come, we're going to see more residential waterfront development that is not too far from the Kallang MRT station, and some of them will probably be condominiums. Paya Lebar is another area. Actually, it's a bit neglected. There's Paya Lebar MRT station. There's one commercial development that's under construction there. But what is interesting here is that the industrial area, actually Paya Lebar, there's quite a number of old industrial factories around there, low-rise area, because Paya Lebar Air Base is nearby, so it can't build very high for safety reasons. But one big area that was zoned for industrial use is going to be now going to turn into reserve site. That means the government is actually planning, keeping it reserved, keeping it in suspense. What would it be actually used for? We are still not sure, but I suspect out of the 3 yellow sites there, about 1 to 2 of them will likely to be residential. So we are going to see around the Paya Lebar MRT station, they are mostly blue, dark blue, which is commercial, or some of them will be mixed development, that means commercial and residential. But the most exciting thing in the new master plan is actually Woodlands. Woodlands, I think this one, I didn't put any circle because you can see very obviously between the 2008 master plan and the 2013 master plan. North of Woodlands MRT station were formerly just all zoned yellow, which is for future, that means reserve site, for future zoning. And you can see that it's all going to end up as either residential or mixed development. And there's also one big parcel that will become commercial. So Woodlands in the future is going to be something like Tampines. It's going to be, you're going to be surrounded by both offices, shopping centers, and also residential, even more residential than what we see around Jurong East MRT stations. Even further afield from Woodlands MRT stations, we are going to see a future business park coming out there. That means, again, something similar to what we see in Jurong East and in Changi. because we've got Changi Business Park, and in Jurong East, we have the International Business Park. So we are going to see this big cluster, all right, of potential jobs, area of job creation, just north. And in this area, there's going to also be the new downtown line. There's going to be more MRT stations coming up around there. So we have jobs creation, we have more commercial space, we have more residential space coming up in and around the Woodlands area. Now, what happens when you have all these new developments that is coming up? I'll give you one example. Let's look at Jurong East. When the government announced the Jurong Lake districts that time, all right, Jurong actually, some people say, unless you work in Jurong, you work in the West, why would you want to buy some of these properties there, like Westmere, the Mayfair, Park Oasis, Ivory Heights. Some of them is a bit more than 10 years old. But you see, the moment in that 5 years from the old master plan to right now, in just last year, 2013, this property prices actually has gone up anywhere from 52 to 80%. It even grew faster than the nationwide condominium prices for suburban areas. So in that 5 years, the price index for non-landed housing in the suburban areas grew by 32%, while these 4 condominium prices, the average prices grew much faster. This is what happens when you have new plans designed for certain areas. Now, another area that has grabbed some headlines is actually all this golf land for golf courses that is going to be, where the leases are not going to be renewed. Okay, one of them is actually Keppel Golf Club, or Keppel Country Club. Now, in this area, you can see on the left, in the 08 master plan, it is mostly zoned for, well, the green area is golf courses, and the blue area is actually the club area, the place where the golf club, the country club facilities is located. In the future, it's all going to, they say, subject to detailed planning, but it's mostly shaded for residential use. Now, is that good news or bad news? Well, it depends on whether are you a Keppel Country Club member. They are not the only one being affected, but I think they are the only one, they are one of the clubs that is going to lose quite a large chunk of their golf courses. Here, in that red circle area are actually some residential areas. Okay, some of them are HDB flats, some of them are condominiums. In the past, if you have this area, you can basically enjoy very good view if your unit is facing the south, right? You not only do you see all the greenery of the golf course, you can see all the way to Sentosa. And I remember from some of these areas, some of these units, you can even see the fireworks in the Marina Bay area during National Day. Very wonderful view. Some of the point block, HDB 5-room point block, the owners don't want to sell because it's so wonderful. No matter how much COV you offer them in the past, they don't want to sell because it's very unique. And they know that in this area, there's not going to be any more new HDB flats coming up around there. But now that with this master plan and the news that the golf course leases are not going to be renewed, in time to come, sadly, some of these developments, existing developments, are going to lose their view of the greenery and Sentosa. So the master plan is not always a tool that can always guarantee that, oh, your property is going to go up. Sometimes, the Chinese saying, 牺牲小我，完成大我, okay? You might have to sacrifice the small person for the benefits of the community. So in this case, there will be some people who may lose their view of the greenery and the sea. So conclusion for part 1, the master plan is an urban planning tool. In the draft master plan of 2013, for most of Singapore, actually there's not much change. So when the master plan came out, I actually asked my colleagues, quickly study it, see whether is there any increase in plot ratio anywhere. Because sometimes I remember when the 1998 master plan came out, it actually potentially led to a rush of en bloc sales. Because for some developments, their plot ratio actually increased. In this time round, there wasn't. Most of the increase were actually on state land. So the biggest winner is the government. There is exciting changes in Holland Village, Kallang, Paya Lebar, Woodlands, and I'm not even talking about the relocation of Paya Lebar Air Base yet. That one is really, I think, way in the future. All right? And I put in bracket and Keppel Club area because that one is it exciting or not depends on whether you own property there or you own club membership there. All right, let's move on to part 2, the Singapore residential property market. The market has gone up and down. I'll touch on this point. Now, property prices and the rentals. Prices and rentals tend to move a bit in tandem. Sometimes some will move a bit faster than the others, but they move in cycles, right? And right now, we have actually been in a very sustained bull run, or coming to somewhere near, we are past the peak of that very long bull run. And if we were to look at, if we were to analyze the price trend of the 3 major segments, the high-end, mid-end, and the mass market, we actually see, not surprising if you follow the newspapers very often, the high-end prices actually has been contracting from the middle of 2013 to right now. And in fact, the price contraction speed up in the 4th quarter. For the mass market, it only started at the end of last year. But in the secondary market, that's the resale market, it is the non-central area. That means those that is outside the prime district actually has started showing a contraction. Now, here is where we see a bit of contradiction, or what appears to be a contradiction. In the mass market is where there's actually a lot of buying demand. In fact, condominiums in the suburban areas enjoy higher sales than those in the prime district of District 9, 10, 11. But that is for the primary market. That is developer sales, right? Because at the show flats, developers are still resisting cutting prices. They will give promotions, they will have events, like for example, during Chinese New Year, they have Chinese New Year promotions. Near the Valentine's Day, some of them are giving away for the first 10 buyers or 9 buyers, diamonds, vouchers for diamonds, and so on. But in the secondary market, where it is one buyer, one seller, sometimes the sellers are willing to be more flexible, and hence we see a contraction in price. What about rental? For rental growth, it has been quite steady. Now, prices actually in the last 4 years has been growing faster than rentals. And rentals has actually, because of its grow at a slower rate, so the rate of change is, if it were to come down, it has also been fairly small. But what is a bit worrying here is in the last column, the 0.8. Minus 0.8, minus 0. Sorry, this one should be a minus 0.8 in red. What is worrying is that rentals in the mass market are actually dropping faster and earlier than that in the prime districts. And why I say this is worrying is because a lot of the sales in the last 3 years has been in the mass market segment, right? Those that is outside the prime district. A lot of Singaporeans and foreigners have actually been putting money and buying into these units in this market. And some of them are actually buying for rental. But now we are seeing that the rental, this is the segment where rentals are the first to weaken. And what I think could happen when a lot of supply in the mass market comes out is that it will put further downwards pressure. And for tenants, the tenants, if let's say you have a rental price competition, some of the tenants will say, okay, for the same amount of rent, now I can basically move to somewhere better, a better location, nearer to MRT station or so on. So we may actually see a flight to quality. So tenants may actually start moving from the more outlying areas towards the more convenient areas. So far, the rental rates and the transaction volume has remained fairly healthy. In 2000, it has been growing constantly from 2006, slight dip during 2009 when we have that small technical recession, but on the whole, it has been growing. And so that is a bit of a good news. Now, cooling measures. Because the Singapore private property prices has been rising quite aggressively, the government actually, our government being a bit forward-looking, has been coming up with rounds after rounds of cooling measures to try to prevent an asset bubble. And so far, every time when they come up with one round of cooling measures, it pulls back the buying demand for maybe 2 months, 3 months, and then after that, the market is back to business as usual. And it goes on and on until 7 rounds of cooling measures. Still the same. Buying volume drop the next month, the month after that, then after that it starts to recover again. Until the government found a silver bullet, something to basically kill the bull. And that one is called the TDSR. They come out with, the finance minister said that the TDSR is not a cooling measure, but actually if it looks like a cooling measure, it smells like a cooling measure, it acts like a cooling measure, the market reacts to it like a cooling measure, chances is that it is a cooling measure, or it has at least the effects of a cooling measure. And here we see why I say that it's a silver bullet is that before the TDSR was introduced in June 2013. Before the TDSR, we can see that up and down, like for example, in January, the government introduced one round of cooling measures, sales volume dropped, and then the next month, in March, it jumped up again, right? But after the introduction of the TDSR, things never recover back to pre-June 2013. The sales volume has been fairly low, to such an extent that that's why developers have to think of, they are putting pressure on the marketing agencies that's marketing their show flats projects to come up with more and more events, interesting events, just to draw people into the show flats. Doesn't matter whether these people are buying or not buying, just have warm living bodies in the show flats. Otherwise, the show flats on weekends can be pitifully empty. And there will be a lot more supply coming up. This is just some of those that have not been launched yet. And the possible launch date goes all the way to even 2015. And also executive condominium. And because the government's measure, it still puzzles me why they come up with this measure, is that from the time the developer buys this piece of land that's meant for EC, executive condominium, they must wait 15 months, or at least the completion of the foundation, then they can launch. But it takes roughly about 13 to 14 months to complete the foundation, so in the end, it comes to about the same. 15 months, then they can launch. So the problem is, here we have quite a number of EC projects. So for those first-time home buyers or upgraders who are looking to buy an EC to upgrade, good news, there is quite a lot of supply or selection coming up after National Day 2014. And roughly, this is where some of those new launches are going to be located. Mostly, some of them in the south, in the northwest, northeast, and the north area. So the outlook. Now, I'm going to paint 2 scenarios for you for outlook. Now, listen carefully. 1, in scenario A, prices fall very gently. It comes down. You know, the URA index, whenever it comes out, you read in the papers the next day, oh, maybe it falls by 0.something%. 3 months later, it falls by 0.something%, and it just basically falls very, very gently. And buying demand is waiting in the background. Because there are people, I believe some of you are here because you are looking to either to buy or to sell. Yeah, that means there is quite a lot of buying demand out there. All right? So everybody is waiting for the right time to go in to buy. And the government knows that, so it doesn't do a thing. It doesn't remove any of the cooling measures. It doesn't adjust the TDSR. So everything remains the same, but the volume continues to shrink. The buying volume continues to shrink. So sales volume drop both in the primary and secondary market. And this is going to impact agents, valuers, even our sponsors ST property, okay, that depends also on volume, and banks' revenue. Actually, banks, they are already, okay, the boss of DBS may say that their portfolio is strong enough to withstand a 30% drop in property prices, but what about if there is a drop in loan volume, you see? Because property loan, the banks have been doing very well in the last few years because of this massive amount of property purchases. In Singapore, most people, when you buy a property, you need to take out a bank loan. And the TDSR actually is hitting it very hard. Scenario B, price fall faster than in scenario A. So it's not that 0 point something % every quarter. This means business, price really drop. Now, as prices drop to a certain level, the government may think that, okay, now market more than stabilized, market actually is in retreat. So perhaps we should adjust some of the cooling measures or maybe even do something about the TDSR. I think one of the first things they will probably adjust a bit more is the additional buyer stamp duty. I think that is when some people will take it as a signal to return to the market, sales volume will increase, it will be a more steady recovery, okay? But we have to bear in mind, I don't have a timing for this, but I know that, I think most of you would know, one of the challenges the PAP government experienced in the 2011 general election was that property prices went up too high. Well, that was one concern, right? People complain, I cannot afford to buy a home, I cannot afford to buy a HDB flat. So that's number one. Number two is transportation, right? Car prices too high or MRT keep breaking down. And number three was security. Okay, somebody managed to run away through the toilet window, and then we got 3 change in ministers. Okay, these three issues. I think they are now going to really crack down on the causeway. Okay, no more tailgating. Very sure about that. So security, I think they'll tighten on that one. MRT, I'm not sure how much they are doing their very best. I'm not sure how much they can, but cars, well, that's not my forte, COE and so on. I think they are trying to find a balance there, the government. Now, for property, HDB market prices, I think the government got more controls on the HDB market, so prices and so on, they will try to keep it. No longer can people come and complain to them, meet the people session with the MP and say, I or my son or my children cannot afford to buy property. Because right now, the government is still supplying so much. Now the problem is, I think some people will go to the government and say, my property prices keep falling. What are you going to do about it? So these are the 2 possible scenarios. Okay, scenario A, gentle price fall. Scenario B, we have a steep price decline. Now I'm going to get a straw poll. How many of you actually prefer scenario A? Raise of hand. Okay. How many of you prefer scenario B? Thank you very much. Now, the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to be afraid of a price decline. Sometimes when I know that there are, actually I was thinking of putting out a slides here about the different analysts, commenters, even CEOs of major companies, banks and developers in Singapore, giving give and takes. Some of them will say property prices may fall by 5 to 10, some may say 10 to 15, some say my bank is not afraid of 30% drop in property prices. Some even forecast an increase in property prices. But my point is, you don't have to worry about drop in property prices because of all these cooling measures the government have put in place. Many of us are not that fully geared. Already some of us, when we go into the market to buy, we have to take loan-to-value ratio of, we have to put in about 30% or 40% of our own money. So the banks actually are quite well protected. So even if property prices were to drop by 10 to 15%, I don't think it will drop more than 15%, basically, because history has shown that only when we have a bad recession, a financial crisis, then will prices drop more than 20%. So I don't think it will drop more than that because so far, the economic indicators that come out is that the economy, okay, we won't get 6% GDP growth, but we'll still get a fairly decent 3 to 4% at least, right? So I think the thing that is actually shackling the property market are all the cooling measures, especially the TDSR. So perhaps it is, in my opinion, it is better to have a short and sharp pain and let the market recover naturally. It's a bit like if you have a Band-Aid, okay, like a Handy Plus. If you want to remove it, it's better to tear it off quick and fast than to tear it off slowly. So that scenario A is a bit more like death by slow strangulation. Now I'll end off, or come to the end. Coming to the end, I'm going to tell you the story about King Canute. This is a real-life king who ruled England about 1,000 years ago. King Canute is quite a wise and good king, all right? But there are people in his court that is trying to sarcasm him, trying to carry favors by saying that, oh, king, you're so great and powerful, the clouds will obey you. If you were to command the sea from, command it not to come in during high tide, the sea will retreat. So the king, to show how foolish these people are in trying to carry favors of him, commanded that his men bring his throne to the seaside. So he sat on his throne while during high tide, as the tide is coming in, he commanded the sea to stop and retreat. Of course, the sea didn't retreat. So the king got his feet very wet, and he also showed how foolish some of those people in his courts are trying to carry favors with him. The point I'm trying to make, the moral of this story, is that there are people out there who are trying to say that property market could rise or not. But I feel that the property market moves in the cycle, just like the tide, right? Just like the cycle of the moon. There will be ups and there will be downs. And we actually already have roughly about 3 over years of bull run, 3 over good years of expansion, and the market is turning. So no matter what some people are trying to say, saying that, oh no, prices will go up and so on, I think it's like those people in King Canute's court. You can't, sometimes there are some things you can change and sometimes there are some things you can't. So in conclusion, the property market moves in cycles. The lead up to the next general election is going to influence housing policies. Is there a silver lining when prices fall? I think most of you would prefer scenario B, knows that there is. One good news right now is that with all these measures that's already in place and prices are really starting to cool, the risk of the government introducing even more stricter cooling measures has been greatly reduced. So I also think that the existing cooling measures may even be reduced if certain criteria are met, right? Don't ask me what are they, I think the government knows better. But many questions will arise when the market goes in transition, as what we're experiencing now. Like, for example, is this the right time to buy? What type of property should I buy? Should I sell some of my properties? And which type of properties not to hold? Now, these are all valid questions, but actually, for each one of them, there is no standard answers that applies to everyone, because everybody's circumstances is a bit different, right? Which is why I'm not just doing research, I also do consulting. And this is part of the services that we provide. I'm not saying that you must call up, but if you do have genuine questions, all right, and you feel that this is personal to you, that's the telephone number I have there. And I'm going to, well, someone suggested this to me. It's not really my original idea, but suggested to me that let's offer to those people who are present in today's seminar, those people who were present yesterday, I don't know them, for the first 10 clients who do call up, we're going to offer a 30% discount on our consulting fees. Serious. Okay, with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.